Pillar to post and coast to coast, this is The Law.
Live audio wrestling.
All right, Dan Lovranski here for the Fight Network and Live Audio Wrestling. And, man, I'm excited today. I got to tell you, I am with the man that I picked as my Wrestler of the Year in 2016 and the man who is in the running for having the best match of the year 4 days into the year with Okada, none other than Kenny Omega. Kenny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thrilled to be here, and even more so thrilled that you had chosen me to be the Wrestler of the Year. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, Kenny, for me, I've always been a huge fan of Japanese wrestling, and the fact that you are the first gaijin ever to win the G1, that just blew my mind, and I just thought that was an amazing accomplishment.
I mean, it really was something that will mean a lot to me until the day that I pass on. I'd given everything to my career in Japan since the year 2008, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally. It was a real, I mean, you could win titles, you can win Match of the Year awards, but I mean, being the first ever foreign wrestler to be trusted with the entire G1 tournament, it was huge for me, and I'm just really glad that I rose to the occasion and did my company proud, and did myself proud.
Absolutely. So how did you feel? Like, what went through your mind when you like found out? Like, I mean, you must have been it was obvious they were grooming you, but I mean, it must have been still a bit of a surprise.
Certainly. The way that the inner workings are in Japan, at least with the foreigners nowadays, we never know anything at any point in time. So I just went into the G1 with the thought that I am going to try my best every match, not to necessarily have match of the night, but what I want to do is tell a different story. I noticed on tour that guys fall into patterns, and they will do certain sequences over and over and over again. And that's fine. That's just sort of the nature of the beast. But I wanted to go the extra mile, and I wanted, at least in my first G1, be a very different person from match to match to match to match, and cater each story to the opponent. So, you know, when we were creeping up on the final days, and I had kind of noticed where my points were sitting, and I had noticed where other people's points were sitting, and I had thought that I've actually got a real shot at this, to finally hear the news and get clearance to kind of have one more match even in the finals. It's sort of culminated to telling one of my most proud stories in my wrestling career that spanned over, you know, I guess the 27 days of the tournament.
Yeah, I just found it a fascinating, because you think of some of those guys that stars from the past, like Brody and Stan Hansen, and those guys that were in the June, and you know, never got that honor, and you were the first. And I'll admit it, I love the fact that it was a Canadian.
Well, yeah. When they always said there's a glass ceiling as a foreigner in Japan, and whether or not that's true, it's always been my mission to sort of prove that, you know, if you have a dream, you just got to go for it, and you can really accomplish anything. We don't live in a world anymore where, well, of course we do live in a world where there is, you know, terrible things like racism, but you can defeat them. You know what I mean? There's all different types of adversity and political things that can deter your progression as a human being or as an athlete or in your job. But if you keep pressing forward and you keep putting your best foot forward, you can defeat them. As foreigners, we have it a little rough sometimes in foreign countries. But truly, anything is possible as long as you're performing, you're doing good business, and you keep a good attitude. That's very important. Yeah. And the most important part is, I'm not trying to toot my own horn at all, but you have to inspire the people. People have to want to see you. You have to.
Absolutely. Get their attention.
You definitely do, whether it be as a good guy, as a bad guy, as, you know, a love interest even, you know what I mean? If your character's a good-looking fellow or whatever, like as something, you have to hook the people. Yeah.
Now, you talked about the issue of racism and stuff like that all over the world, everywhere. Was there any backlash that a gaijin was going to win the G1 at all?
No, of course not. I mean, New Japan has always been, especially lately, has been such a multicultural promotion. I mean, you look at a roster these days, we have, I mean, at least half of our full-time roster is now foreign. And they truly believe in having representation from around the world, not just American and not just Canadian, but I mean, now we are bringing a lot of wrestlers from the UK. We bring in wrestlers from Mexico as well. We're always open to bringing in the best talent regardless of where it's from. And I think it helps create another layer of interest to the types of matches that we display in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We've always been known as the king of sports, the king of strong style, and now you're seeing this mix where you might get something that's generally very strong style versus luchador wrestling, and you get that interesting dynamic. Sort of something from MMA. They say styles makes fights, and you may not get to see, the top CMLL luchador athlete versus a very classical, strong stylist anywhere else but New Japan. And I think that's just sort of, part of the appeal of going out of your way to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Now let's talk about some of the matches. We got to talk about the Tokyo Dome match there from the beginning of the year with Okada. I mean, I'm sure you guys don't sit down and just go, let's have a match of the year candidate. But was the thought? I mean, it is the biggest show. It's basically your guys' WrestleMania. It is the biggest show of the year. Were you guys going out there to steal the show?
I was. I had an opportunity to main event another really big show in 2012, and that was at Budokan. And I had told what I thought was probably the most athletic story between two friends in a wrestling match that I could possibly tell, that I was physically capable of telling. And I felt that my only folly in that effort in storytelling was that I was too narrow-minded, and I targeted just our home fan base. I targeted, this match is for DDT, and I targeted the DDT universe. Only the DDT universe could understand the intricacies of what we had put into that match. And going into the Tokyo Dome, I wanted to, again, tell the story of two very different athletes, but keep it a very athletic story again. Of the chosen one, the company's chosen one, versus the foreign threat, the natural athlete, the freak athlete that came from a land unknown. Except in this particular occasion, I didn't want to direct that story just to the New Japan fans. I wanted to tell a story that had no language barriers. I wanted to tell this story to the entire world. So I was able to learn from that time in 2012, grow as a performer, and tell this brand new story that everyone could hopefully appreciate in 2017. Luckily, I suppose I did it. It's probably my most proudest performance as a performer for those reasons. Not only being able to have just, a match that I'm personally proud of, but to see that, yes, there has been change and I have improved as a wrestler, as a performer, since what was my biggest match in 2012. So it was very fulfilling. That's it. Just very fulfilling to have successfully done that match.
It was a fantastic match, and I do agree. I thought the storytelling was fantastic in it, and the thing that I always loved about it is that you did that great storytelling, and that when you did do a spectacular spot, like that one spot off the top or the table spot, it actually meant something way more in your match rather than seeing it, 50 times in a match.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, in this day and age, they rely too much on the flash of the move itself. So many moves now look prettier than they ever did from when they first performed. Um, Shooting stars nowadays, it's always has been a fantastic move. But the shooting stars of today look so much prettier than the shooting stars from the 90s. But the shooting stars from the 90s can arguably have meant more, back in the day when people were doing them, because it was always a finish. Um, it was always in very rare scenarios when people were doing them. Now, I mean, I can name 25 guys that are doing shooting star presses, and a lot of times it doesn't mean anything. The guys that are great, they do them, they look great, and they're placed right, but there are a lot of guys that are just doing them to do them because they can do them. And I think, that's sort of the plight of today's pro wrestling, is that our everyday athlete has actually gotten better. Freak athletes are not so rare as they were back in the day. However, because it's so easy to rely on your physical ability, the intellect has been sort of ignored, and not so much thought process has gone into the who, what, where, when, why. And I definitely, as a professional wrestler in the position that I am in, I would rather have people remember my matches for an emotion or for a certain thought it evoked when they saw it. Yeah, like I don't want people to look back at my match and say, when you did that move, it was good, and I liked it because it was cool. I want people to remember sort of a rush of images and the emotion that they felt when they saw it. That's when I think you have a real masterpiece in your hands.
I completely agree, and that's exactly how I felt watching that Tokyo Dome match, is that, it wasn't really about the great-looking moves. It was, what a great story these two guys are telling in the ring.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's hard because it is easy to lean on cool moves when you know it's going to get a guaranteed reaction, but you always have to weigh, the pluses and the negatives as to, are you losing sight of the bigger picture if you're going to just rely on the move for the move rather than the move placed in the story you're trying to tell. And it's so hard to, because sometimes there are moments where you just need a damned move, You need to do something physical because, after all, it's two guys fighting in the ring. But I think the more you can eliminate those moments when you feel like you just need to do something physical, the more appealing a match is going to be to the everyday viewer, the casual viewer, the young viewer, the old viewer. The more of a broad audience you can attract with your art. Shibata has done that headbutt many times to no injury whatsoever, and it's unfortunate that now, with the final one against Okada, it may have been a career ender.